of you have heard about the people who died because of the dirty water in Flint, but do you know what the water did to the brains of the kids in Flint, Michigan? That is a haunting part of the story. To help us discuss it and find out the facts, we're going to bring on Anthony Baxter, who's an award-winning director who made the movie Flint. He's also made You've Been Trumped, You've Been Trumped 2, A Dangerous Game, and Eye of the Storm. Anthony, welcome back to the TYT.
Thanks for having me, Cenk.
No problem. So, first of all, I want to clarify something that's really important. The people who died in Flint died from Legionnaire's disease, not from the lead. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, we know officially there are 12 deaths registered from Legionnaires, but the true number is believed to be much higher, around 50. And that's because we know about the pneumonia deaths, which has similar characteristics in pneumonia death to a death from Legionnaire's disease. But yeah, that's right. In Flint, the lead hasn't killed anybody as such. It has damaged people horrendously, of course, but it's also true that many mothers have talked of the loss of their unborn children as well through the poisoning in Flint, and all of the other chemicals that are in the water, of course. I mean, we know about the lead, which you've mentioned there, Cenk, and also Legionnaires, but there's also other contaminants. I mean, people's hair was falling out, people have skin rashes. A lot of that is still unexplained today.
So I want to talk about why they made this decision and the consequences, because there are actually people facing criminal consequences, politicians, which is unheard of in America, so it's interesting. But the reason I started with Anthony asking you about Legionnaire's disease versus lead is because since the lead does long-term damage as opposed to Legionnaire's disease, which instantly can kill you, right? I think I'm worried that there's 3,000 towns that have lead problems in their water right now. Reuters did a huge story about it several years ago. But since it's not killing people on the spot, we're kind of ignoring the same thing that happened in Flint with lead happening all across the country because it's not jumping out to us as more immediate. So that's why I wanted to go to that amazing fact. You talk about what happened to the kids, their average test scores 3 years later. Can you tell us about that?
Well, the test reading results of children have plummeted in Flint, and that's a group of children studied by Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the local pediatrician who made the link in the first place between the high lead levels in Flint. Because just to remind your viewers, Cenk, about what happened, the water source was switched in Flint, as you may remember, from the Great Lakes to the local river. And the local river, it was the corrosion of that water, the corrosive nature of that water that damaged the pipes across the city of Flint. And as you rightly say, we know that so many cities across the United States and in my country as well, in Britain, has the same issue. These lead pipes buried deep beneath the ground. We don't really know the full extent of what's going on down there a lot of the time. And when you pump corrosive water through the system, as what happened in Flint, it interacts with that protective layer in the pipes, and it tore that protective layer off, the corrosive water, because it hadn't been treated properly. And that is what led to those, as scientists said at the time, you may remember, this toxic waste levels of lead, big chunks of lead coming off these pipes and into people's homes, a population in Flint at the time of around 100,000 people. And the impact that has had is just devastating, because we do know that children's reading score levels have plummeted in the tests that have been done by Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha and others, studying the impact of the lead poisoning on children in Flint. But there's so much more that we don't know. And I think that's why I think it's so important that the story of Flint isn't forgotten because of the many, many cases around the country, as you say, where similar things have been going on since. And it's so easy, isn't it, with all that's going on in the world, whether it's the war in Ukraine or the cost of living or whatever it is, for the spotlight to move on to other stories. But I just think it's really crucial that the story of what happened in Flint and what happened to the children and the people right across the city is not forgotten.
So guys, when they switched the water to the dirty water, and we'll get to why in a second, it created the diseases that killed people fairly immediately, but it also corroded the pipes, as Anthony just explained, which caused the lead to come out. The lead does brain damage. There is excellent analysis showing that the excess lead in our oil, by the way, the gas that we use in our cars, the paint that we use, et cetera, caused a massive spike in crime in the 1970s and 80s. That it wasn't related to any policy, it was related to the lead. And now we're seeing it again, now that the lead is in the water, to the point that Anthony was making. I'll give you the stat. 3 years later, reading scores had dropped more than 70%. Just in 3 years, dropped 70%. That is unbelievable. Lead literally causes brain damage. So, and it is not just Flint, guys. 3,000 towns across the country. And you don't know it until it's too late in a lot of these instances. But now we do know because of movies like this and the attention that's being paid, and yet we're not doing nearly enough. So let me go back, Anthony, to the original cause of this in this particular town. They were getting the water from the lakes and it was working fine for 5 decades. Why'd they make the switch in the first place?
Well, Governor Rick Snyder, and I remember you covering this story extensively at the time, Cenk, he wanted to save money. He sent in so-called emergency managers into Flint to help to save cash. Now, the people in Flint were paying, and are still paying, the highest water bills in the United States. And so the bean counters saw a possibility of reducing the costs of the water that they were getting from the Great Lakes, which came via Detroit and was piped to Flint. And they saw the opportunity to cut costs by switching to the local river. And there's a water plant in Flint, which your viewers will recall, that tower that's become the Flint Water Tower, which has become so striking as an emblem for this story. And the water tower and the water plant was an aging water plant. And they decided to switch the water source to the river to save cash. But they didn't do any of the homework. They didn't realize that this water was so much more corrosive than the lake water from Lake Huron. But as well as that, of course, there's a history in Flint of in industry and car manufacturing. And what they found was that this new water source started to corrode the parts at General Motors. And when I first arrived in Flint, it was early 2015. It was before the story became a big national story. Nobody really heard what was going on. I was in Detroit doing a screening of a previous film, A Dangerous Game, which you mentioned, which has a water theme to it. And at that screening, one of the residents said to me, you should come through to Flint to do something on the water here, because we've been complaining about it since it switched to the Flint River in April 2014. So by that stage, the local people had been jumping up and down for over a year about what was going on. Their hair was falling out, skin rashes. They suspected this high level of lead because the water color was foul. It was brown color. People remember residents holding up jugs of brown water on the local TV news. And nothing was being done. And it was a classic case of people jumping up and down, calling on people in power, Rick Snyder, the governor at the time, and the local mayor to do something about it. But they just ignored it. They said, oh, there's nothing wrong with the water. And the mayor was on TV drinking it, saying, this is a fuss about nothing. And the residents called in Dr. Mark Edwards from Virginia Tech to oversee a citizen science test of the water right across the city. So everybody took part in this and took these samples of the local water. And it was Dr. Mark Edwards' team from Virginia Tech that then certified that this water had a very high lead level count in it. And that was the moment when that happened was August 2015. I remember it very, very clearly. And then Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha, the pediatrician I mentioned from the local hospital, she then made the link between when the water had switched to the river and the lead levels then shooting up in kids right across the city. And this was a fact now, and the local authorities couldn't ignore it, and Governor Rick Snyder then decided to switch the water back to the Great Lake source. But it was too late because the damage had been done, the pipes had been corroded, and ever since then, the people of Flint have lost trust completely in their water. I mean, I was there just a few weeks ago, and still the queues around the block, there are queues for blocks and blocks of people waiting to pick up bottled water because they just don't trust it. They don't trust the water, even though the scientists now say that the water in Flint is as safe as any other city in the United States.
Yeah. So, by the way, that idea of bringing in businessmen to run government is disastrous on 2 counts. One, everybody assumes that businessmen are competent. Really? Have you met businessmen? So they're not a model of competence either. And secondly, more importantly, business culture is all about money, 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 and it doesn't care about other factors as much. That's a terrible model for the government that's supposed to protect people and emphasize lives over money. So it was a disaster waiting to happen. But last thing here, Anthony, and by the way, the movie's available on iTunes and Amazon, and you could, it's still out in theaters in some places, so flintdocumentary.com for you guys to be able to get the information. All right, the movie's Flint, and kidding aside, iTunes and Amazon, that's where you could get it. Anthony Baxter, thank you for joining us, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.
All right, now we're gonna bring on a former Republican congressman to talk about what's wrong with the Republican Party. He's the host of the podcast White Flag with Joe Walsh, and he also is the author of F Silence. So, not playing. Joe, welcome back.
Good to be with you, Jank, always.
Yeah. So listen, we had the shooting in Buffalo, and so this is when the right wing says, "Oh, it's just a lone wolf. It's no big deal. You can't characterize the right wing and the Republican Party in this way." But it's not really a lone wolf. We also had the shooting in El Paso, also because of the Great Replacement Theory. We also had the shooting in the synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018, also because of the Great Replacement Theory. All right wingers, all looking to attack. We see it on Tucker Carlson's show. I'm going to get to the politicians in a second. So, and Joe, on top of that, we have polling that shows that nearly half of Republicans now believe either strongly or somewhat in this white replacement theory. So, in your experience, having been a Republican congressman, what do you think, like how real is this as a phenomenon within the Republican Party? Is it still, in your experience, in fringe, or has it become far too mainstream in the Republican Party?
Hey, Jank, it's mainstream. Not only am I a former Republican congressman, I'm a former Republican radio or conservative radio talk show host. And the scary truth is, and you and I've talked about this before, the base of the Republican Party has become fully radicalized. And what does that mean? They no longer believe in truth. They've given up on democracy. And this ugly element of the base, which used to be more fringe, ever since Trump, is now mainstream. And this is the America's changing. I wish we had 1954 America back. I wish America was whiter. That's a part of now the Republican base, and people like Tucker Carlson and Hannity and the rest of them, they inflame it.
Yeah, so Joe, I don't know if, like, since you spent obviously a lot of time in the Republican Party and because of conservative talk shows, etc., do they have a benign explanation for replace to do what, right? So like, if somebody said to me, hey, you're gonna be replaced by black people or Latinos or Jews, I would say, okay, what am I getting replaced for? Well, what was I like? What's the topic matter? I don't know. Maybe they're better than I am. Maybe the black guy's a better accountant than I am, and then he should replace me because I don't want to be an accountant. And so the obvious explanation is no, replace their power, and hence. Yeah. Obviously, it's racial in its core. Do they even have an excuse or a non-racial reason that they talk about this issue?
You know, Jake, broadly, and again, this was my base, and full disclosure, I engaged in some of the inflaming of these folks more than I'm proud of. But it's generally, we want white Christian America back. Damn it, that's what we understand. So that's their broad feeling, and I still hear that every day from them. But Cenk, you nailed it. It's about power. It's about losing votes. They believe that if we let everybody in this country and we expand immigration and we don't secure the border, well, these are all future Democratic voters. And the Republican Party will never be able to survive in a country like that. That's what they believe.
Yeah, I mean, but super ironically, Trump in 2020 did better with Latino voters than he had in 2016 and better than Republicans in the past had. Doesn't anybody in the Republican Party say anymore, hey guys, instead of hating them and instead of assuming they're all gonna become Democrats and they're gonna replace white people, why don't we just try to win their votes?
Yes, Cenk, exactly. And that's the conversation that I'd engage in with my Republican colleagues in Congress all the time, Cenk, who would tell me privately, the more these people who vote, we're gonna lose. And I would say exactly what you just said. Well, come on, let's persuade them. Let's convince them that freedom and opportunity is better than big government. But the Republicans didn't want to engage in that at all. Now, you make a really interesting point. White people are afraid of this whole we're being replaced thing. But no, Hispanics in this country, they don't look at it like this. And they are tending to vote more Republican. That's a problem that the Democratic Party has because the Democratic Party, Cenk, is increasingly more out of touch with working class Americans.
Yeah, no, look, I would love to disagree with you on that, but you're not wrong. That's why we're both independent, because we can actually rationally look at what's right and wrong with both parties. And the Democratic Party's now leadership is filled with elitists. They never talk about economic issues. Everything is, cultural issues. And Joe, ironically, aren't the Nancy Pelosi's of the world allies with the Tucker Carlsons of the world as they distract us from economic issues while their corporate donors rob us blind? And they both are happy to engage in the culture wars so that we don't focus on the actual robbery.
Completely, and Cenk, you and I may disagree on a lot of those economic issues, we would, but that's all these voters talk about. Look, Cenk, I hear over and over every day, I hear working class Americans across the board, they tell me, and I'll watch my language, they tell me that Republicans are jerks, Trump's just a liar, but Democrats are wimps who don't understand people like me. And so you're spot on, and you've talked to this a bunch. The Democratic Party, as bad as the Republicans are, the Democratic Party is becoming this party of like wealthier elites, utterly out of touch with what some working class dude anywhere out in California feels.
The minute that anyone on the left says that to them, it's both Democratic leaders, consultants, lobbyists, and most importantly, the mainstream media that will jump down your throat and say, no, do not believe your lying eyes. Those pathetically weak and incompetent Democratic leaders are actually lions and master strategists and amazing heroes. On what planet? They get steamrolled by Republicans on the daily when the Republicans have gone in this crazy direction. And they're still winning. Trump is now likely to win the next presidential election. You can't get any weaker than that. So look, I can go on for 20 minutes straight about that. But I actually want to come back to one, unfortunately, racial component in this story, okay, in the Buffalo shooting story. So in the white replacement theory, In a lot of the instances, the theory is, and Tucker Carlson's referred to George Soros, who's a code word for this, right? And the manifesto, the shooter talked about this. They say, we are going to be replaced by Latinos and black people, etc. But it's the Jews that are orchestrating this. So now it's coming through clear as day to people like me paying attention. If you tell anybody in Washington, they're still like, oh, no. Both parties are great on it. They're the same on anti-Semitism. They're not in my opinion. But Joe, how much do you hear that? Did you hear that before? How much do you hear that today in right-wing circles when people think that everybody in the room's right-wing? And
it's there, Cenk. It's look. And I think you'd agree with me. There is anti-Semitism is interesting because you find anti-Semitism on the far right and the far left. It's not nearly as subtle though on the far right, because again, this notion of I want a white Christian America, we focus a lot on the fact that all these black and brown people, and they're upset about the black and brown people coming in, but they're also really upset as what they'll say, the Jews behind the scenes who are helping to orchestrate all of this. But all of my former Republican colleagues in the House and the Senate, not only are they ignoring the white supremacy that happened in Buffalo over the weekend, they won't say a word about this anti-Semitism in their own House.
Yeah, no question. And so now Elise Stefanik is the number 3 Republican in the House. She's in Republican leadership, and she's talking about a permanent election insurrection in her ads, saying that the immigrants are going to cause the insurrection by replacing presumably white people. And she talks about how granting amnesty to illegal immigrants, as if somebody was going to do that. No, that's not even on the agenda. Stefanik was basically a corporate Republican and a Paul Ryan acolyte. The fact that she has moved in a lunatic direction doesn't indicate that she's a lunatic, because she previously did not have any mental health issues, right? Is it a bellwether for which way the Republican Party is going?
Look, Cenk, all of us Republicans, we had a decision to make in this era of Trump. Do what we believe is right or sell our soul to get reelected. And the vast majority of Republicans, like Stefanik, sold their soul, adapted to Trump to get reelected and stay in power. And I get pissed off at all of these talking heads on MSNBC and CNN who continue to ask how much power Trump holds on the party. It's his party. And that is not changing anytime soon. He will be the 2024 nominee. No Republican will challenge him. And Elise Stefanik, Kevin McCarthy, all of these people know it.
So Joe, from your perspective as someone who's not on the left, when you see Biden say, oh, it's this fraction of the Republican Party that's ultra MAGA, and that's the problem, not all Republicans, isn't he in essence helping the Republican Party to pretend that the party is not all MAGA, is not all Trump, when in reality it is?
Yeah, it absolutely is, Cenk. And I think I read last week that a bunch of Democrats or liberals helped him 6 months of research come up with this ultra MAGA phrase. I don't know what that means or where that came from. I don't think Joe Biden and I don't think most Democrats understand the threat. This is not fringe in the Republican Party. This is now one of America's 2 major political parties is fully anti-democracy. And I don't know why Joe Biden is afraid to say that. He should. Every Democrat should.
All right, you see, we're both independent minded, okay? And we're not gonna listen to anybody's BS. Joe, thank you for joining us, we appreciate it.
Cenk, keep doing your thing, man.
The concept of the Young Turks means the audience They are the young Turks. They are the go-getters. They are the ones making the emphatic change happen in their local community. The reality is that we've always, young and the not so young, we've always cared about news. But when you do not see the messengers of the news look like you, when they do not share your experiences, exposures, and environment, and there's a disconnect between you and the news. I lecture in mass communications. One thing I tell all of my students, there is no such thing as non-biased news. It never has been. Non-biased news has always been an illusion. Let's go back to the 60s and 70s, where people would say that was the purity of non-biased news. News has a segment. That segment has a time. That time, you must do your story and be finished. That means the producer, the writer, the orator has to take out what they don't think is important and only leave in what they believe is important. They have a limited time to tell the story. They do not have time to tell everybody's version or everybody's side. And they get to choose the facts that they bring to you, as well as the nuance, which really is a word for opinion, that they bring to you, the context they bring to you. So we've always had a level of bias in news. Here's the issue. The issue is to not deceive individuals as if you don't have some level of opinion with your news commentary. And that's what TYT has never done. They've always been authentic in their approach to progressive ideology and their news analysis and political breakdown. And I think that's how you actually win the heart and soul of individuals who are consuming information from you, because now they see themselves in you.
This is where it all began for many elected progressive leaders. The Young Turks was one of the few media outlets to cover the races of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, and many, many more. We know a great majority of the country is actually progressive, and TYT is here to amplify these issues so that we can have better policies that a majority of the country actually supports. We want to drive positive change, and we've been doing that for 20 years here. That's why we're launching Canvas 2022, a campaign to get out the vote and amplify progressive candidates, the progressive agenda, and their primary races. The midterm elections are fast approaching, and we know mainstream media won't cover progressive voices, but because the TYT audience is too strong, we can make a difference in the midterm elections to help progressives get elected and make sure our priorities are heard. Support our mission to drive positive change. Visit tyt.com/canvas2022.
There is so much heinous news out there. That's why we've got to laugh, not to cry. So join me, Francesca Fiorentini, and some of my progressive friends, comedians, actors, experts, and activists, as we deliver an hour of laughter and analysis every week on my podcast, The Bituation Room. The Bituation Room is an invitation for all of us to take ourselves a little bit less seriously while still giving you some concrete ideas for action. New episodes are available every single week, so join the Frantifa and listen to The Bituation Room on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your TYT network podcasts. And make sure to subscribe and give the show 5 stars, because I like stars.
Welcome to TYT. I'm your host, Anna Kasparian. The show is going to be lit today. We have so many topics to get to. I don't even want to waste any time on giving you guys an intro, but I'll give you a little sneak peek, okay? So you know what to expect on the show today. We're gonna interview an economist and an expert on how to say no to your boss. Really looking forward to that. That'll take place in the first hour today. The title of that book is The No Club. And even though it's targeted mostly toward women in the workplace, I do think that there are important lessons to learn from it for all of us, regardless of what our gender might be. Later in the show, we'll also talk about how Donald Trump is reacting to the fact that the Pennsylvania Senate race involving his preferred candidate, Dr. Oz, has not been called yet. Trump is losing his mind over it and would like to essentially fraudulently declare Dr. Oz the winner, even though they haven't counted all the ballots yet. But that shouldn't be surprising to you. And of course, John Idarola will be joining me later in the show to talk about some of the fast food worker strikes that are taking place across the country, along with some other light news that I think you guys will all enjoy. So without further ado, let's get to our first topic. I want to keep talking about these anti-choice, anti-freedom, anti-liberty Republican politicians, starting with Marjorie Greene.
Here's what I want to encourage women to understand and know.
That's Marjorie Greene. You should never, ever take her advice.
If you accidentally get pregnant, let me tell you something. That abortion that you're considering having, that's not going to solve your problems. It's not going to make that boyfriend of yours or that guy love you. That abortion won't do that.
Can you imagine taking advice from Marjorie Greene, who is one of the most disastrous lawmakers in Congress? Now, she is trying to sugarcoat the reality of what reversing Roe v. Wade would mean for women. And she's trying to make it seem as though being forced to carry a fetus that a woman doesn't want to carry and being forced to have a child that a woman does not want to have is not going to impact her life in any negative way. In fact, it's actually going to somehow magically make it easier for her to get through college or to start her career or move up the ranks within her job. Like, she genuinely thinks that women are stupid enough to buy it. And to be fair to Marjorie Greene and Republicans like her who want to take a woman's right to decide what to do with her own body away from her, it's an incredibly unpopular position to have. And so now, all of a sudden, you have Republican lawmakers trying to force feed us all of this magical thinking and positivity about what being forced to carry a fetus to term would really mean for women across the country. Remember, 70% of Americans, that includes Republican voters, do not want to reverse Roe v. Wade. They believe that a woman should have a right to choose. Believe it or not, there are actually some Republican voters out there who aren't massive hypocrites when they talk about the importance of freedom and liberty. But when it comes to evangelicals, when it comes to religious fundamentalists, when it comes to right-wingers like Marjorie Greene, we're not allowed to have any say over our reproductive rights. Instead, it should be the Supreme Court and it should be lawmakers on a state level, and soon, if Republicans take control of Congress and the executive branch, it'll be the decision for the federal government as well as to whether or not we can make decisions about our own bodies. Now, I want to get to what she said there, right? Let's go to the next video because she continues the magical thinking about what it means to be a woman who's forced to have a child that she does not want to have. Let's watch.
It's not going to help you pursue a career that you think you want to pursue. It's not going to help you finish college. Let me tell you what will help you out more in your life. When you have a baby and you love someone more than you've ever loved anyone in your entire life.
So her argument is having an abortion isn't going to help you get through college. It's not going to help you start a career. Having an abortion, no, it's actually going to be much better for you as a woman And it's gonna be easier somehow for you to do the things that you wanna do in life if you're forced to have a child that you don't wanna have, that you might not be ready to have, that might be the child of someone who raped you. It's actually far, far better for you to not have a choice over your own body. So that is a lawmaker, a Republican lawmaker from the state of Georgia. And let's have a discussion about what it's like to be a mother in America. And let's take abortion out of it. Let's just talk about what it means to be a mother in the United States, in a country that provides virtually no security, no safety, and no support if you're a mother. Okay, so if you don't have the means to raise that child, if you don't have the means to put that child through school, if you don't have the means to pay for childcare so you can get back to work, you get no support. Let's not get it twisted. That is the reality in America. And these right-wing lawmakers want to force you to do something with your body that you might not want to do. And then once that child is born, they then throw their hands up in the air and say, we can't do anything to help support you because that would be dangerous, Marxism, socialism, and then they'll throw in a bunch of other words that they can't define if you actually ask them point blank to define it. Okay, so let's take a look at the worst states and the best states to live in if you are a working mother in America, okay? And I want you to keep in mind that Marjorie Greene is a lawmaker from the state of Georgia. Okay, great. So let's start with the positive news, I guess, and this is all relative. I mean, if you compare the best states to be a working mom to, let's say, some of the Nordic countries or Scandinavian countries and the kind of support that they offer, I mean, it's night and day. But in the context of the United States, where we don't get much support at all, the best states to raise your child are as follows. So you've got Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the District of Columbia, Vermont, New Jersey, New York, New Hampshire. Now let's go to, and by the way, let's keep that up for a second. This was done by Wallet Hub. They did an analysis and they actually looked at a number of different elements of these various states and what they offer to help support working mothers, right? So that includes childcare, professional opportunities for working mothers in the state, work-life balance, and they score all of that. And look, each state has different programs in place, right? There are federal protections. For instance, if you take leave because you just had a baby, federal protections prevent your place of work from firing you, but let's also acknowledge that places fire women for having children all the time anyway, and they get no protection at all. But there are other states that offer absolutely no protection whatsoever, okay? No social safety net, no program to assist them, especially if they are in a lower socioeconomic status. So let's look at the worst states to be a working mother, the worst states. Oh wow, what a shock. So many red states represented there, including Georgia. Out of 51 states that were looked at for this analysis, Georgia comes in at 43. 43. Now, California is not doing so great either. California is at 42, but I would argue that that has more to do with the cost of living and how the social programs in the state of California don't really help to mitigate the insanely high cost of living in California, okay? But going back to Georgia, it would be far better if our elected lawmakers who claim to be pro-life spent more time focusing on what they can do to create an environment that actually encourages women to want to have kids, rather than just forcing women to do things with their bodies they don't want to do, to have to bring life into this world when they're not ready for it, they don't want to do it. And Marjorie Greene's response to that is, oh, but love will solve it all, okay? Your career will be just fine. We're not gonna help support you and no childcare. We're not gonna help you with your medical bills, none of that, but it's gonna be fine because you're gonna have someone that you really love. Love will save it. Love will save you. She doesn't believe that. We know she doesn't believe that. You know how I know she doesn't believe it? Because Marjorie Greene is the same as Lauren Boebert. Okay, QAnon conspiracy theorists, absolute morons. And when it comes to the social programs that actually would support families, what do they have to say about it? Well, let's go to Lauren Boebert. She'll remind you.
Mayor Pete was on a 2-month maternity, paternity, whatever the heck you want to call it, leave. The guy was gone, okay? The guy was not working. Because why? He was trying to figure out how to chest feed. Maybe someone should tell him, please, so he can get back to work. Listen, I'm a mother of 4. I delivered one of my children in the front seat of my truck because as a mom of 4, we got things to do. Ain't nobody got time for 2.5 months of maternity leave.
Ain't nobody got time for 2.5 months of maternity leave. So in other words, pop your baby out, back to the mines, and shut up. That's the right-wing ideology in America. So what do you do with your baby, your newborn baby, if you're not allowed to take paid time off in order to nurture a newborn that you just were, in the ideal world of Republicans, you were forced to bring into the world, okay? Who do you leave the infant with? You're breastfeeding. You might have had a C-section where literally your abdomen was cut open. Your insides were taken out of your body in order to make room for taking the baby out of your body, and then you're stitched back up. When exactly does Lauren Boebert propose that women be forced back to the mines? Is it the day after? Is it 2 days after? Just curious about that. Even if a woman has a vaginal birth, she needs time to recover. She needs to breastfeed. She has to wake up multiple times every night to feed the infant. But ain't no time for maternity leave. Back to the mines. These are these so-called pro-life Republicans in America. They're not pro-life. What they are is anti-freedom, anti-liberty, anti-say over your own body. That's what they're about. And by the way, let's talk a little bit about how much childcare would cost if you are forced back to the mines. If you don't show up, your livelihood could be taken away from you, right? So exactly how much would it cost in a state like Georgia, for instance, to put your child in childcare? Well, costs have gone up considerably, especially during the pandemic. Childcare costs have increased by 41% nationwide due to the pandemic. Families in Georgia saw the highest increase in the country at 115%. The average annual cost of childcare in Georgia was just over $6,000, but during the pandemic, prices rose to more than $14,000 per year. The Build Back Better bill would have assisted with childcare costs, would have made childcare far more affordable for Americans. And you know who voted against it? Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Greene, because they're not the pro-family party. They're not the pro-life party. They're part of a party that just loves to control women, loves to force their theocratic ideology onto all of us in a country that's supposed to be in favor of separation of church and state. That's what's really going on here. And what they stand for is so unpopular that you now have them trying to sugarcoat what the reality is. Let's just keep it real. In a country with absolutely no support for new moms, for new families, being forced to have children you don't want to have will absolutely destroy your chances of establishing a decent career, of getting through school. But they don't care. Because one thing I know for sure about the Republican Party is they love nothing more than putting people in desperate situations where they have no choice but to take low-paying jobs or take any job or deal with any situation, because now they're not just looking out for themselves, they have to feed an entire family that they were forced to have. That is what the Republican Party stands for. All right, we're gonna take a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna have a wonderful guest on to talk to us about non-promotional tasks, how we're all pressured to say yes to them, and what that means for our careers and our personal lives. Look, the point of this is, how do we say no to our bosses? I love this topic. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about that and more.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them, turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual respect and conversation with one another. And as I said earlier, I mean, not only do I feel that through the work I do, I'm informing our audience, but they inform me oftentimes as well. You know, they'll pitch stories to us. They'll tell us, a certain perspective or angle to a story that we might have missed. And I love it.
Our TYT audience has been building this show and this network with us for 20 years. Now we're expanding and connecting our audience around the world in even more exciting and powerful ways. Look, I don't want you to miss another petition, poll, community conversation, or TYT segment. Connect with informed, passionate, and compassionate progressives, and even new progressives. They're joining our movement every day. This is gonna be amazing when we work together. So our community members are learning together, they're building lifelong relationships, and even politically organizing together. Here's what Power Slave Wolf has to say as they begin interacting with our community after making TYT their #1 trusted news source. Quote, I've been a TYT viewer since the Obama years and have since found them to be a far more trustworthy news source than most TV news outlets. Away from viewing TYT, I'm a musician, electric bass guitar, sim racer, satire enthusiast, and rollerblader. The latter being my main means of intense exercise. TYT, my local news, none of the stations in my area are Sinclair owned as far as I know, and comedy style news shows are my trusted news sources. The former and the latter both having something in common in that both have something that TV news sorely lacks. A very low tolerance for BS. So sign up for free at tyt.com/community. We're making it easier to connect, stay informed, and even take action.
Hi, I'm Bartholomew Joseph Kyle. I do audio for the main show, The Young Turks. I also do audio for Post Game. I started in 2006. I met Cenk Uygur at the Iraq for Sale screening that was directed by Robert Greenwald. And watching that, I want to figure out a way to be part of something that's genuine and authentic.
Ice cream.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Anna Kasparian, and I am looking forward to the conversation we're about to have. Most of us have experienced feeling overloaded and burnt out because we say yes to too many things at work. Now, for women, that problem seems to be more pronounced. And the real question is, how do we say no? And more importantly, what kind of impact does it have when we keep saying yes to things we might not even really want to do, but more importantly, doesn't actually lead to career advancements or promotions? Here to talk to us about that is Lisa Vesterlund, who is the co-author of a wonderful book titled The No Club, Putting a Stop to Women's Dead-End Work. She co-wrote the book along with Linda Babcock, Brenda Preiser, and Lori Weingart. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you about this, Lisa. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
So I had the privilege of reading the book before it was out, available for others to buy. And it came at a time when I personally was feeling a little overwhelmed because I was finding myself saying yes to all sorts of things that it's like this pressure that I was putting on myself to say yes, and also a fear of what might happen if I say no. And I want to kind of get to the bottom of what inspired you and your co-authors to write the book, because you kind of got together and you realized you had a similar problem. All of you shared this similar problem with your workloads. And so talk to me a little bit about that before we get into what non-promotional tasks are.
So about 12 years ago, I and a group of my friends, we all realized that we were sort of stuck at the same problem. We were all overloaded with assignments and working really, really hard and feeling like our careers sort of had stalled. So we started to meet and we formed what we called the No Club. And part of the reason why we called it the No Club was that we realized that the assignments that were keeping us so busy were assignments that really weren't core to our jobs. So we sort of vowed to start saying no to all these assignments. And the beginning of this club that we had was really focused on how do we say no to things? How do we get our workloads under control? And gradually we began to understand that it wasn't really just a problem that we were having, rather it was a problem that lots of women were having as well. And when you were saying, Anna, that you had a hard time sort of saying no, part of the reason why we have a hard time saying no is that everybody expects us to say yes. So it's very hard to say no when everyone expects you to come forward with a yes.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think that's true. But there's also a fear of what the consequences of saying no might be. Is that something that you explored in your book? So did you find that workers, and I know that this is more focused on women, although I think men can get a lot out of this book as well. Did they feel that, maybe if I say no, that could actually lead to retaliation, even if the work I'm being asked to do is not part of my core responsibilities?
No, absolutely. So indeed, it turns out that if a woman says no, she's perceived very negatively, whereas a man who says no is not perceived negatively. So it is challenging for women to say no to these things because the consequences of saying no can be quite severe. They will be seen as not being a team player. They will be seen as, some of the words that are attached to women who say no are even more severe. So because of these collective expectations, it's hard for women to sort of fix this problem on their own. We tend to think that women are taking on all this work because they like it or because they're really good at it. But what we're finding is really that these expectations that we all hold of them is what pushes them into this bind where they have to take on the work that really isn't rewarded and isn't recognized by the organizations that they work for.
So let's get to the nature of that work and kind of define it. So it's been dubbed in the book as non-promotional tasks. And you kind of gave a brief definition of what that means, tasks that aren't really related to what your core duties or your job description entails. But can you give some examples of that to kind of help people understand what you mean?
Yes, what we mean by non-promotable tasks are tasks that are important to the organizations, but doesn't help advance your career. So you could think of it as work that sort of helps out other employees in the organizations. It could be helping, if somebody's sick, it could help with onboarding a new employee. It could, be taking notes at a meeting. So it's a lot of work that sort of keeps the wheels turning within the organization, but tends to be not directly linked to the mission of the organization, tends to be invisible, and typically is work that lots of people can do, not just you. So it doesn't use your specialized skills, which is why you get very little recognition for it.
And what are the ramifications of saying yes? I mean, we think about the possible retaliation or the ramifications of saying no, but what kind of impact does it have on someone who continues to say yes to this non-promotable work?
The consequences for women are very severe. So what we're finding is that women in every single organization we've looked at are doing more of this work than men. If you are a TSA worker, supermarket clerk, architect, engineer, working in academia, this is showing up everywhere. And it is showing up in hours that are much greater than most of us expect. So we work with a professional services firm where we found that women were spending 200 more hours per year on non-promotable work than their male colleagues. So the ramifications are very severe, both in terms of pay and in terms of advancement, but also in terms of sort of overall stress and loss of confidence. We keep talking about how women are more burned out than men, and we sort of focus on the demands from the home. But what we're seeing is that the demands from work are very excessive, both because women either end up working many more hours to find room for the non-promotable work, or that they end up with this imbalance where they really don't get rewarded and recognized for their talents.
And are there, because as I think about it, are there possible upsides to saying yes to non-promotable tasks? For instance, maybe one positive outcome is as you say yes to these tasks, you show that you're dependable, people can rely on you. Are there ever any positive outcomes or positive benefits to saying yes to work that isn't necessarily gonna get you promoted?
Absolutely, everybody. So that's a great question, because everyone has to do some non-promotable work. In any organization, there's going to be work that isn't anybody's particular responsibility. So everyone has to step up to do some non-promotable work. And if you do none, you're likely to get fired. The concern is just that you don't want to do too much. So saying yes is beneficial to a certain extent. It can also be beneficial because it can sort of connect you to other people. It can give you skills that you then can use elsewhere for more promotable work. The challenge is just that oftentimes when women start doing these non-promotable tasks, they don't just do them once. It may help to do the holiday party once, but if you do it multiple times, whatever skills you might acquire will have very strongly decreasing returns. So there are benefits to saying yes to some non-promotable work. What we're seeing, however, is that women are just saddled with far too much non-promotable work. And it really means that they never get the same opportunities for demonstrating their skills within the organization. And that's harmful to the women, but it's also harmful to the organizations who presumably want to promote and advance the employees who are best at the work, rather than the ones who are sort of least reluctant to help out and take on the work that the organization really needs.
And really the negative ramifications aren't limited to what women experience in the workplace. It also has an impact on their personal lives as well. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so it has very negative consequences on your work life. So I myself was working far too many hours to try to fit in all the non-promotable work. When we started the club, I had young children, and I wanted to be a mother and a professional at the same time. But the non-promotable assignments I was getting really meant that the only way I could fit in all the work that I had to do was to get up really early in the morning, work really late at night, and regrettably, it took a serious toll on my health because I was working so hard to keep up with all the demands on my time. And I think my employer would have been better off if some of all the non-promotable work that I was doing had been distributed more equally across the employees in the organization.
And you gave some examples of professionals, like professional careers that certainly experience this in the workplace. Most of those are white collar jobs. Are your findings also applicable to individuals working in blue collar jobs, whether it be in manufacturing, maybe individuals working in, let's say, the service industry? What were your findings when it came to those types of jobs?
So as I mentioned, this is a phenomenon that shows up everywhere. Indeed, many of our examples are from white collar jobs, but everywhere you look, you will see that women are taking on more of this work. So a great example is looking at a study that was done on supermarket clerks, where the females tend to be put at the checkout line, whereas the males get the experience of working around the store. And what that means is that the women don't get the same experience around the store and can't get promoted later on. If we look at TSA workers, what we're seeing there is that women more than men are put on pat downs, which means that they, once again, are sort of relegated to one particular task and don't get the experience that helps them advance. In any job that you're in, women more than men are given the assignment of helping new employees come in and get familiarized. Women more than men are being asked to help new employees get situated. And it takes time away from the core tasks that they have, which means that they will get promoted and compensated less than their male colleagues.
So we're speaking to co-author Lisa Vesterlund. She's the co-author of the book, The No Club, Putting a Stop to Women's Dead-End Work. And we've discussed the negative ramifications of saying yes to non-promotable tasks in the workplace. Those ramifications impact not just the person's career, but also personal life as well, because of being overburdened with all these tasks, all this work that doesn't even necessarily translate to a promotion or a better paying job. And I want to talk about solutions now, because this is where things could get a little risky depending on who your employer is. There's this expectation, especially for women, to pick up the slack and say yes to non-promotable tasks in the workplace. To counter that, to mitigate that, to prevent that, what do you propose workers and women in particular do?
So I think the first step is to figure out what is promotable and non-promotable. Sort of get a clear sense of what is the work that I should be doing to get to the career that I really want. The second step is then to figure out what is it that I need to say no to and yes to, and change the way that you say yes and no. So what many of us tend to do when we think about saying no is that we don't immediately go to thinking about offering a solution to the person who's requesting help. And what they really want is help. So explaining why you can't do the work and proposing a solution in the form of somebody else doing the work, making clear that the reason why you have to say no is that you can't work on the product launch. That's why you can't work on, a less important task, so that you make clear what are the costs of you taking on that work. So changing the way that we say no is the first step. Another step is to change the way that you say yes. You don't just have to say yes to an assignment. You can negotiate that assignment by saying, okay, I will take on this work if you can take off this other non-promotable assignment that I already have. Another opportunity is to suggest that you do it this time, but not next time, that you have a clear path for getting off the assignment, or that you even look at the assignment and say, this is a really big assignment. How about if we divvy it into 3 different components, and I do component A, and Jim and Bill will do the 2 other components. So changing the way that you say yes is another way of doing this. But in general, it isn't just a question of sort of changing what you do. It is a question of seeding change within the organization by bringing attention to all the non-promotable work that women end up doing. So next time you come into a meeting and they ask for a volunteer, say, oh, I read this study. It turns out that if you ask for a volunteer, women are 50% more likely to take on the assignments. Why don't we just put names into a hat and randomly assign it? Or why don't we take turns? So these small changes can sort of stir up these expectations that we all hold of women taking on this work, and can gradually get us to a point where we are more aware of the non-promotable work sort of ending up with the women.
One of the things though that, to be quite honest with you, bothers me is how much of the onus is placed on the workers to, figure out ways to communicate, figure out ways to delegate these non-promotable tasks. But something that really stands out to me is the fact that these employers just refuse to hire people to do these jobs specifically. So for instance, I was listening to a talk that one of your co-authors was giving in regard to this book, and she specifically gave the example of women working in academia and how they end up doing all sorts of administrative work. And what I kind of fail to understand is, why not hire someone who is dedicated to getting the administrative work done? So what are your thoughts on that? And are you noticing that issue with employers where they're trying to like save money, so they're just kind of like throwing all this extra work onto their employees?
No, so that's definitely, hiring administrative assistants to doing the administrative work would be a benefit to the women, but it certainly would also be a benefit to the organization. Having, certainly in academia, you have a highly paid faculty member who is spending time on work that an administrative assistant could do much more cheaply. But I think part of the challenge is that we haven't paid attention to this. It's that the employer doesn't know exactly what it is that we're doing. And bringing up this conversation about what are we doing? How much time are these talented women spending on non-promotable work? I think one of the striking things on the 200 hours that we found was that when we looked at more senior women, they were also doing 200 more hours of non-promotable work, but they were doing the same amount of promotable work. So they were just working crazy hours to fit in all this work, where many of the assignments really could have been handled by somebody at a lower rank. So you don't want to have a senior woman who is highly skilled spending her time on work that could have been handled by somebody at a lower rank and for whom the work actually could have been promotable.
Yeah, one of your findings that I thought was so fascinating was, when comparing men and women in regard to their, willingness to take on this work, women are actually way more willing to raise their hand and volunteer for that non-promotable work. Can you talk about the difference between men and women in regard to how they handle those requests, and even how rejecting those requests looks for a male versus female in the workplace?
Yeah, so one of the studies we have is where we sort of try to mirror what happens when you come into that dreaded meeting where a supervisor comes in with an assignment that nobody wants to do, but everybody knows that has to be done and that it will benefit the entire organization if it gets done. And what we see in that setting, we all know how it plays down. The supervisor asks, suddenly everybody acts as if they can't really hear. They're checking their phones, they seem distracted, and some reluctant volunteer has to take it on. And what we see in our studies is that women are 50% more likely to raise their hands in this setting. And the intriguing part about that is that they're not raising their hands because they're certainly not in our study. This is a study where there's no difference in skill. So it's not because they're better at it. And we also show it's not because they care more about getting the work done, because when we then compare what happens in an all-female group to an all-male group, we see that groups of all women volunteer at exactly the same rate as groups of all men. So it's not that the men don't know how to volunteer. It's just they don't volunteer unless the women are in the group, or they don't volunteer as long as the women are in the group. So it's really coming from this gender composition. When there are men and women in the group, men and women expect the women to step up and take on the work. And that expectation plays over even when the manager gets to ask someone to take on the work, because managers who look at male and female employees are far more likely to ask the female employees to take on an assignment than they are, a non-promotable assignment, than they are to ask a male employee. So these expectations are really critical when we're sitting in these situations and somebody has to take an assignment that helps out the team, because we all expect women to do it. They know that they have to step up and take the assignment for the team.
And final question for you. I know that this wasn't the purpose of the book, but I am curious about your thoughts. What do you think about efforts to unionize in various workplaces in the country right now. You know, the United States used to have a pretty strong and militant labor movement that's died down significantly, but now we're starting to see this reemergence of labor militancy. I'd like to see a lot more of it, to be quite honest with you. But I want to get your thoughts on whether that could also be a solution to kind of mitigate what you're noticing with all of this non-promotional work that women are taking on.
I mean, it's a very unique time that we're in right now, because suddenly labor is in super high demand. We've had this great resignation, we have the great reshuffling, and workers finally have an opportunity to demand things that they have never been able to demand before. I don't know if the unions there's certainly many things that can come through the unions. I don't know if this is a way of attacking this. I certainly, what we've seen in the organizations we have worked with is that once they realize how large the gap is, that they themselves recognize that this is not in their interest. So while there's sort of a very strong fairness case for doing something in terms of how we distribute work, there's also a strong business case. The businesses are hurting themselves by doing this. So perhaps the unification can help the organizations and the employers come together and understand this better. So, you know, I'm hopeful that our book will make everybody open their eyes and recognize that this is in their interest to fix this. But perhaps the unions are a way of bringing attention to this. I think the unions in most places are working on sort of very easy to measure issues like pay and diversity, equity, and inclusion. But certainly by fixing and making sure that we get equal opportunities to work on promotable assignments and demonstrating our skills, many of those differences are going to fall into place. Certainly, women would be more likely to be more attached to the labor market. What we're seeing very disturbingly is that women of color are hit far more severely by these non-promotable assignments. So bringing it down to looking at assignments might be the way to do it.
All right. Lisa Vesterlund, co-author of the book, The No Club, Putting a Stop to Women's Dead-End Work. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. I really appreciate it, and I hope you come back soon.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Of course. All right, well, we're gonna take a brief break, and when we come back, we're gonna continue on with the rest of the news, including an abortion access meeting, or hearing, I should say, that took place today. Video from that hearing is just unbelievably disturbing. Our elected lawmakers and the questions they ask of experts when it comes to this incredibly serious issue is embarrassing, to say the least. So don't miss it. We're gonna take a brief break, and we'll be right back. What's up, everyone? I hope you guys enjoyed that interview. I want to read some comments from our members, starting with Sunseth J, who says, I had an abortion my freshman year in college. Because of that, I was able to finish college and become a teacher. Now I've inspired the minds of thousands of children over the past 20 years. Thank you for sharing your story. Ian says, what's the deal with Republican women who push the replacement theory yet have no kids of their own? Yeah, that's interesting. Marjorie Greene, I actually haven't really looked into her family situation. I don't know if she's had any kids, but fair point. Anahita13 says, throughout my 48 years on this earth, I can't even begin to count the number of times I've heard, if you can't afford to raise children, don't have them, especially when the subject of social safety nets comes up. Exactly. Albelzo says, so let me guess, Marjorie Greene fights day and night to push for social programs that help single moms, right? No, she votes against them, as you probably already knew. Conrad Williams says, and Mississippi, the state where the 15-week abortion ban that is before the court now originated, has the worst child poverty rate of all the states. Texas is the second worst. You're right about that. And another good metric to look at is how much funding they provide for their statewide foster care system. I remember reading about how Texas had a foster care system that was just so deeply underfunded. And what you hear from right wingers who are confronted by women who say, well, I don't have the means to raise a child. You can't force me to do this. Well, you could give the child up for adoption. Okay, but I mean, that is not a solution to the problem here, especially when they're suggesting putting children in a system that they themselves have underfunded or defunded. We have Defender Dragon who says, the way the US treats its citizens is barbaric as compared to other wealthy nations. We are being deluded into thinking we are free when when we are very much modern day servants to corporations and the wealthy. Here, totally agree with you on that. I want to read a few super chats here, starting with Peter Hamby, who says, love out of wedlock to please those wanting the Greens, knocked up agenda. Marjorie Taylor Greene, maybe you can help me find love if you want me to have kids. I'm single, I'm still single. Oh, Peter, thank you for that poem. Waldorf Nation also says, I'll be easier for you, but we won't help you. Oh, it'll be easier for you, but we won't help you, referring to Marjorie Greene's nonsense about her anti-choice position. All right, we gotta get back to the show. We'll be right back. Super chats from our audience, starting with the Progressive Canuck, AKA Maple Syrup Dragon, who says, can I get a shout out and love from everyone for one of our own, Bark Eater J, who is currently in the hospital, and let's all look forward to a speedy and good recovery. Yes, everyone send good juju, send good vibes. Hopefully Bark Eater J makes a full recovery. And Lizzie Bennett says, in regard to the interview we just did, taking notes for the next task Cenk throws at you, Anna. Seriously though, keep up the good work. Cenk is actually one of the best bosses. He does not at all retaliate if I say no. For me personally, and it's different for everyone, I was putting pressure on myself to say yes, and then realized that I was like a mess and super stressed out, and it wasn't good for anyone. I wasn't doing my core job responsibilities well as a result of that. So I kind of had to learn to set boundaries and not be so judgmental toward myself. But other people have different situations, and I think that book was helpful. Again, I know that it was targeted toward women mostly because it is more prevalent for women to say yes to non-promotable tasks. But I think that the book really will resonate for everyone. I think we all find ourselves feeling the pressure to do things at work that we don't necessarily want to do and isn't really helpful for our career goals. All right, with that said, let's get to our next story.
Do you support the right of a woman who is just seconds away from birthing a healthy child to have an abortion?
I think that the question that you're asking does not realistically reflect abortion care.
In that scenario, would you support her right to abort that child?
I won't entertain theoreticals.
It's not a theoretical, ma'am. You're a medical doctor.
I am a medical doctor, and that has never happened.
Never happened in your practice, ma'am, but it happens. How about if a child is halfway out of the birth canal? Is an abortion permissible then?
Can you repeat your question?
If a child is halfway delivered out of the birth canal, is it permissible to have an abortion? Would you support the right for an abortion then?
I can't even fathom that ever.
I'm not asking you if you can fathom it. If it occurred, would you support that abortion or not? That's unrestricted abortion, right?
That's a question that I can't imagine. Just like you probably can't imagine what you would do if your daughter was raped.
If you found that line of questioning to be ridiculous, as Brett would say, hold on to your butts, because we're about to hear from more of these Republican lawmakers during an incredibly important hearing on abortion access. Now, this was the House Judiciary Committee, and the doctor who was being grilled on a theoretical that isn't at all part of reality is Dr. Yashika Robinson. Now, Congressman Mike Johnson from Louisiana is the one who decided to continue the GOP trend of fear-mongering about late-stage abortions and partial birth abortions. And I think we need to cut through the BS on that topic before we get to the rest of what happened during this hearing. Because the fact of the matter is, partial birth abortions for perfectly healthy babies, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen, which is why the doctor there was confused by the line of questioning overall. Why are you asking me about something that doesn't happen? And the reason why it doesn't happen is because there is a literal federal ban on it happening. So let's talk about partial birth abortions, okay? The idea that a woman gets pregnant and decides to carry a fetus for 9 months, and then as she's about to deliver, that's when she decides, after going through an uncomfortable and terrible pregnancy for 9 months, she decides, no, now I'm gonna make a decision as I'm delivering that I want to abort the baby. And that doesn't happen. Okay, I want these guys who don't know what it's like to be a woman and don't know what it's like to carry a fetus for 9 months to understand that it doesn't happen. No woman in the country, in the world, is deciding like, I could have had that abortion in the first trimester. I could have even had it in the second trimester, depending on what state I'm in. But I'm gonna go ahead and carry this baby for 9 months. It's uncomfortable. It changes my body in some cases, terrible ways. But I'm gonna wait until I'm about to deliver, and then I'm gonna order an abortion. How ridiculous is it? So let's talk about the laws. And I'm talking about federal laws. Because back in 2003, Congress, meaning on a federal level, passed a law banning partial birth abortions. Okay, partial birth abortions have been banned. And the Supreme Court actually upheld that ban in 2007. Let me give you the details. And there are exceptions to partial birth abortion bans. That makes sense to save lives. So let me give you the details. Again, this is in 2007. The 9-member US Supreme Court ruled 5-4 last week, again, this is in 2007, to ban the partial birth abortion procedure in the United States, okay? So the court upheld a federal law banning the procedure that was passed by Congress in 2003. The law had been challenged in the courts for lacking an exception to protect women's health, not just their lives. So let's understand what happened with partial birth abortion. It's fine to say I'm against partial birth abortion when we're talking about a healthy pregnancy, a healthy mother, no medical complications, nothing, right? That makes sense. Of course, what person would want to abort a baby at that late stage, a healthy baby, when the mother's life is not at risk? That doesn't happen, there's a ban. However, there are rare cases in which the woman's life is in danger, or the fetus, or her life or her health is in danger, or the fetus, it might be a stillborn, who knows what the situation is. But to say that there are healthy pregnancies in this country that are aborted at the very last minute as the baby is being delivered is a lie. They are lying to you. You wanna know why they're lying to you? Because it's what they do on a regular basis, number one. But number two, they understand that an embryo, that a zygote, that a non-viable fetus is not the same as an actual baby. Okay, a viable baby is a life that can survive outside of the mother's womb. Okay, very different, in my opinion, from an embryo or a zygote or a non-viable fetus. And so what do Republicans do? They want to fearmonger. They want to paint a picture to make it appear as though like an infant is being murdered right after it gets delivered or as it's being delivered. That doesn't happen. So let's get to some specific numbers here. When do abortions tend to happen? This is according to the Centers for Disease Control. The majority of abortions in 2019 took place early in gestation. In fact, 92.7% of abortions were performed at less, like when the woman was at less than 13 weeks gestation, okay? A smaller number of abortions, only 6.2%, were performed at 14 to 20 weeks gestation. And even fewer, meaning about 1% or less than 1%, were performed at 21 weeks gestation. And when it does happen that late in a pregnancy, it's because there is danger involved in carrying that pregnancy out, meaning that the woman's life is in danger, or there are serious abnormalities with the fetus, meaning that it is not likely to survive outside the womb. But according to the GOP, if you're likely to have a stillborn, or if you're likely to give birth to a fetus that is not likely to survive for much longer, it doesn't matter, you still have to carry it out. It ain't up to you, it's up to guys like Congressman Mike Johnson. And if you thought his line of questioning was ridiculous and ignorant, intentionally so, by the way, he wasn't the only Republican lawmaker. Get a load of this compilation of dudes, bunch of right-wing dweebs who took this hearing as an opportunity to push other culture war narratives or made it abundantly clear that they don't understand a woman's anatomy. Let's watch.
What's a woman? Can you answer the question, what's a woman?
I'm a woman.
I'm just saying, so you give me an example of a woman, you say that you are a woman. Otherwise, can you tell me what a woman is?
Yes, I'm telling you, I'm a woman.
Is that as comprehensive a definition as you can give me?
My body, my choice. The baby is not the body of the woman that it's inside of. Abortion care, who's being taken care of there?
Well, are you familiar with premature babies, preemies?
Of course, yes.
Yeah.
If a child is halfway delivered out of the birth canal, would you support the right for an abortion then? What do you say a woman is?
I believe that everyone can identify for themselves.
Do you believe then that men can become pregnant and have abortions?
Birth control, it's actually a consequence of the lack of birth control. Planned Parenthood, it's the lack of planning.
Those guys get to make decisions about what I do with my body. And they come from the political party that incessantly tells us that they are for freedom and liberty. They come from the same political party that turned coronavirus into a needless culture war issue, with masks serving as the prominent symbol of that culture war. 1 million Americans died so far during the coronavirus pandemic. You think that that was necessary, that 1 million Americans needed to die? You don't think that possibly our Republican lawmakers standing in the way, serving as a massive obstacle in doing the right thing to protect actual human lives during the pandemic was something that maybe we should think about, something we should consider? These are not pro-life people. These are people who have no problem cutting food stamps that children living in poverty rely on for sustenance. These are Republicans that have no problem deregulating companies to the point where, a corporation like Abbott, for instance, which makes Similac and other baby formula, doesn't have to worry about the regulations necessary to prevent bacteria from getting into baby formula. I mean, these are lawmakers who think you should just let the market decide, even if the market decides that profits are more important than people. Deregulation is great, even if it means that your food and your water is poisoned, which could lead to severe illness and death. They don't care about you. They don't care about lives. They've proven it over and over and over again. And what's even more frustrating about this whole situation is that these guys are idiots. that they don't understand anything about what it means to be a parent, what it means to be a mother, what it means to be a pregnant woman, what it means to be a mother who's living in poverty and has absolutely no support from her government in helping to raise her child so her child, which they purport to care so much about, can live a happy, healthy life. That is the reality in America. Abortion is a culture war issue specifically because it is a tool that's utilized by the GOP to accumulate political power and to control the lives of women. That is it. Because the fact of the matter is, you are free to believe whatever the hell you want to believe about a fetus. And if you believe that a zygote, embryo, fetus, whatever it is the same as a living, breathing, independent human life, great. Don't have an abortion. But that is your belief. It is not based in science. We're talking about actual lives that are viable outside the womb, right? Zygote, not viable outside the womb. Fertilized egg is not the same as an actual baby that's viable outside the womb. But if you think it is, if you want to ignore all of that, you want to ignore the science, you get to make the decision over your own body in a perfect world. But when it becomes a culture war issue that's meant to accumulate power for a political group or a political party, you don't get to make that decision because it's not about common sense. It's not about saving human lives. Again, it's just about power and control. I mean, we're about to have laws that are far more draconian than some of the most awful countries toward women, honestly. Like, some of these Latin American countries that do have far more theocratic nonsense injected into their politics, they're gonna have looser abortion regulations than the United States will. And this is the country that's supposed to be about liberty and freedom. Give me a break, it's absolute garbage. All right, I'm gonna do one more story before we bring John in. A mere 3 weeks after its announcement, DHS's Disinformation Governance Board is being suspended, and that follows weeks of controversy that's been fueled by right-wing attacks. Now, before I get into the details about this, let me just note my own biases should be upfront. I think that it's the right move to suspend this Disinformation Board. I think the Disinformation Board was not defined clearly. I think that it seemed to be some weird, vague, aimless government organization as part of DHS that would have absolutely been abused by a GOP administration. But with that said, let me tell you how this all went down and the failures of DHS under the leadership of Joe Biden to really sell this to the American people. So, unlike the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984 that became a derogatory comparison point, neither the board nor the person who was supposed to serve as the head of the board, Jankowicz, had any power or ability to declare what is true or false or compel internet providers, social media platforms, or public schools to take action against certain types of speech. In fact, the board itself had no power or authority to make any operational decisions. So the Disinformation Board didn't really have much power in terms of, I guess, censoring the various platforms where disinformation tends to spread. So what exactly would it do? And honestly, till this day, it is not clear. And that is a failure on the part of DHS. So the board, as Taylor Lorenz reports, was created to study best practices in combating the harmful effects of disinformation to help DHS counter viral lies and propaganda that could threaten domestic security. I find that fascinating because the Disinformation Board and DHS overall did a pretty terrible job countering the disinformation by the right wing in regard to the Disinformation Board. And honestly, the Disinformation Board and DHS did a pretty good job assisting the right wing with their disinformation and their attacks because they were just so terrible in explaining what the hell they were up to, right? The government is not supposed to violate our First Amendment rights. And if you're not abundantly clear about what your Disinformation Board is supposed to do as part of a government agency, the DHS, then people are gonna wonder, like, what is this? And it could be a massive violation of my constitutional rights. I think that is a legitimate, common sense concern to have, which is why it was important for them to be clear about what this board was supposed to do. Now, Alejandro Mayorkas, who's the secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, was asked about this, and his answer was terrible. Let me remind you of what that looked like.
What will it do?
So what it does is it works to ensure that the way in which we address threats, the connectivity between threats and acts of violence are addressed without infringing on free speech, protecting civil rights and civil liberties, the right of privacy. And the board, this working group, internal working group, will draw from best practices and communicate those best practices to the operators, because the board does not have operational authority.
Will American citizens be monitored?
No.
Guarantee that.
Well, so what we do, we in the Department of Homeland Security don't monitor American citizens.
You don't, but will this board change that?
No. The board does not have any operational authority or capability.
So when you watch that, did you get anything out of it? Did it answer any questions about what the disinformation board, which again would be part of the Department of Homeland Security, what would it do? That did not answer any questions. And so when you're not clear about what it's gonna do, and when the rollout is as disastrous and chaotic as it was in this case, it opens an opportunity for the right wing to run with it, to run with whatever narrative they have, and that is in fact what happened. And by the way, just one quote from a spokesperson from DHS. The board's purpose has been grossly mischaracterized. It will not police speech. Quite the opposite, its focus is to ensure that freedom of speech is protected. Really? How? How would it protect freedom of speech? I don't really understand. But anyway, let's talk about the rollout of this new department, which again has now been suspended. And I think suspending it was the right choice, to be clear. The board itself and DHS received criticism for both its somewhat ominous name and scant details of specific mission. Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas said it could have done a better job of communicating what it is and what it isn't. Agreed. In fact, Mayorkas himself could have done a better job in describing what the purpose of this board was supposed to be. Now, administration officials did not brief the relevant congressional staff and committees ahead of the board's launch. And members of Congress who had expressed interest in disinformation weren't even given a detailed explanation about how it would operate. Like, is there anyone competent in the federal government right now? What is this? So then that creates an opportunity for the right wing to viciously attack the person who was supposed to be the head of the disinformation board, okay? So Nina Jankowicz is her name. She has now stepped down, which, I guess is the right move. It didn't even really matter. They suspended this disinformation board anyway. But she was supposed to be the head of the group, and she was the target of this right-wing smear campaign. Just hours after Jankowicz tweeted about her new job, far-right influencer Jack Posobiec posted tweets accusing the Biden administration of creating a ministry of truth. His 1.7 million followers quickly sprung into action. By the end of the day, there were at least 53,235 posts on Twitter mentioning Disinformation Governance Board, many referencing Jankowicz by name. And then, of course, as we know, what tends to follow one of these right-wing spear merchants who spend all of their time jerking off on Twitter is just the right-wing lawmakers taking the lead, right? Following his lead, and that's exactly what happened here. Republican lawmakers echoed Posobiec's framing and amplified it to their audiences. US Senate hopeful and Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt and Representative Andrew Clyde both posted similar tweets. Former Congressman, or Congresswoman, I should say, Tulsi Gabbard also posted a video repeating his statements. And then, as always, all of the right-wing rags decided to pick up this story and fearmonger about it as well. But look, to be fair to them, I mean, it raised red flags for me too. What is this board supposed to do? And even after like the media circuit that DHS Secretary Mayorkas did, it was still unclear. And even if you're super trusting toward Democrats, okay, you think, no, don't worry about it. Like, this sounds great. The government, monitoring disinformation is awesome because Biden's in charge and Democrats are in charge. First of all, I disagree with that. But secondly, okay, but Democrats aren't always in charge. And would you like knowing that, let's say the Trump administration has a so-called disinformation board meant to monitor disinformation? Would you be okay with it if they're not clear about what the disinformation board is then supposed to do in response to the disinformation? Look, disinformation is a problem, but I don't think the Department of Homeland Security dedicating a portion of its department on a disinformation board is the answer. And it's just a mess. All of it is a mess. So I feel bad for Jankowicz because she ended up being collateral damage in this whole disastrous situation. Some were simply mocking her, making fun of her for parodying a song from Mary Poppins. I saw it, by the way, it was super cringe. To talk about misinformation. In another instance, a performance where Jankowicz sings a popular musical theater song about a person's desire to become rich and powerful was misrepresented to imply that she herself was after money and power and would sleep with men to get it. Because the right wing, of course, is always classy. They gotta have a face, they gotta provide a face, a person, a specific individual to attack. And unfortunately, she ended up being the person who had to deal with the brunt of that. But again, this is more an issue with the haphazard way the Biden administration and his cabinet tends to roll things out and handle certain situations. And now they're closing up shop and it looks super weak, right? Because they announced this 3 weeks ago and now they're like, oh, we got a lot of attacks by the right wing. We should cancel this, let's not do it. Look, if you want to dedicate government employees to studying disinformation, how it spreads and whatever, just do it. But like creating a disinformation board, I think rightly raises red flags. Rolling it out in a haphazard way where people are questioning what it's about is also a problem. And then when the person who's supposed to head this program gets smeared, attacked, and defamed by the right wing, you turn around and you tell that woman to not defend herself, and that's exactly what happened. Final part of this story. As she endured the attacks, Jankowicz herself was told to stay silent. After attempting to defend herself on Twitter on April 27th, she was told by DHS officials to not issue any further public statements, according to multiple people close to her. I mean, it's just pathetic. All of it, every part of this is pathetic. The smear merchants, pathetic. Haphazard way that the Biden administration and DHS rolled this out, pathetic. And the way that they didn't let a woman who was being unfairly targeted defend herself, also incredibly pathetic. This is what they're wasting their time with, when in reality, the federal government unilaterally could do things that actually materially improve people's lives, like very easy, like canceling student loan debt. Biden, just do like the bare minimum, do the 10,000 that you promised earlier. Can't even do that. It's just, we're supposed to support this. We're supposed to be excited by this party. It's just one nightmare after the next. All right, we gotta take a break. We'll be back with more.
I'm old enough that I remember when Captain Crunch put the berries in it.
Yay, crunch berries!
And I was like, ooh, the fake berries.
Remember?
We're gonna try that.
We did a story back in the day about how a woman sued, I don't know, General Mills.
She'd been eating it for 4 years, right, believing that it was actual berries. Yeah. She's like, these aren't real berries at all. Yeah. I'm like, I got news for you. Captain Crunch isn't really a captain or a person. Joining me now, legendary whistleblower and American hero, Edward Snowden. First question is, hey, where are you?
I'm in my apartment in Moscow.
All of a sudden, in the studio, Jim Gaffigan, everybody.
Mental illness is, completely undiagnosed in our society.
It's not about a particular administration. It's about a broken system of power, and through that, really, the instrumentalization of a system of not justice, but injustice.
People understand whether they claim to deny climate change or not. Our collective house is in crisis. We're also dealing with the legacy of 40 years of economic policies that have made people's lives more precarious.
Sometimes you got to force people into their humanity. Sometimes you have to shake people into empathy.
Senator Elizabeth Warren joins us in the studio.
Healthcare is a basic human right, and we are fighting for basic human rights.
In order to actually achieve that vision of everyone having access to the same resources and getting to determine the outcome of their life, we have a lot of work to do, and it needs to start right now.
Here's something you may not know. When you deposit your money in a big bank, it doesn't just sit, safe and secure, in a vault. Instead, your money could end up building oil pipelines, mining for coal, or drilling in the Arctic. So if you're concerned about the planet, give your money something good to do. Make the move to green with Aspiration's fossil fuel-free account and join the thousands each week who are switching to save their dollars and save the planet at the same time.
Welcome to the Damage Report. I'm John Idarola. This is gonna be a big one.
What Donald Trump has done as president has cut taxes for the wealthy and made life better for rich people. But he's made life worse for poor people.
We're making America great again by throwing more money at the military to destroy other countries because that makes us great instead of investing it in ourselves.
That it's Donald Trump and it's Stephen Miller. The choosing is based on wanting to create cruel and inhumane conditions to scare other people away from ever coming to the United States.
The opportunity to make money off of tragedy is the American way.
There's only one place to put garbage people: in the trash.
We've never had so much access to so much information with so little idea of what the hell is going on.
What does enforcing our borders have to do with traumatizing children? Absolutely nothing.
I think a sane person could say the current situation we have right now is radical. But what we're doing is literally making the world more like hell. That's a warning sign.
ShopTYT.com now has books. One of them is Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People. That's a saying that AOC said, they've got money, we've got people. It's the best tracing of the AOC victory I have seen anywhere. It's the most accurate, and it's got great details. The book actually goes all the way back to Jesse Jackson and how he's the original Bernie Sanders. If you want to know how we're going to win going forward, those lessons are super important, and they're in Ryan's book. So check it out right now at ShopTYT.com. We found the perfect person to lead the army, Allison Hartson.
The establishment media works hand in glove with our corporate legislators, and our corporate legislators work hand in glove with the corporation. And we're going to make it so that it's a decentralized force throughout the country so that we can quickly identify stories, quickly identify troll farms, and go in and neutralize the enemy, and then start building responsible media throughout the country and on every platform available.
I got news for you. Later on, I'm gonna put marijuana in my body, and it doesn't matter. Wow, man.
Ice cream.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Anna Kasparian and John Idarola, who was out of town to collect his Webby. No big deal.
No big deal. Literally, no big deal.
How was the award ceremony?
It was cool. There was a lot of people, and there were some celebrities there, and
like
there
real
was
celebrities or like YouTube celebrities?
Real celebrities. I mean, I was more interested in several of the YouTube celebrities I saw, but no, like Big Bird was there. And,
I would like lose my mind.
That was pretty cool.
Big
Anita
Bird
Hill,
taught me English.
Ben Stiller, Drew Barrymore, a few people like that.
Wow,
that was cool. I got to see one of my favorite, like this guy MKBHD is my favorite like tech YouTuber. He presented an award. It was cool.
Very nice, very nice. Well, special thanks to the audience for
they're the ones who made it happen.
Exactly,
and Julie and the rest of the team too.
Yes,
but
yes. The one that well, I haven't gone in a while, mostly because I don't want to go, but.
We went to the Shorties together.
It's the Shorties.
Yes, we went to the Shorties.
And then there's the Streamies, right?
There's also the Streamies, yes.
Got it, okay. Understood. All right.
Eventually there will be the Twitchies.
Well, it's good to have you back. We've got a lot to get to, so I'm just gonna get started. Let's get to our next story.
All of the tolerant lefties
were seemingly so thrilled to tell me how the people on the right hated me. It's like, well, are you guys showing me tolerance? I didn't get any love or affirmation from you guys.
That's Dave Rubin speaking with Candace Owens about the unsavory individuals who reacted to him and his husband, David Janet, announcing that they're gonna have children through surrogates. Now, the right wing, his audience did not react to it well. We talked about it on the show, but I gotta hand it to Dave. I mean, he does, I feel like he deserves an award for how he somehow manages to take hateful rhetoric and the hateful response he got from right wingers and somehow turn it into a left wing problem. It is impressive. Like, he doesn't strike me as a particularly talented or smart individual, but he has found a way to twist a narrative to somehow take the blame from the right wing and place it on the left wing. It's amazing.
Yeah, for a grifter, it's the prime directive. I've been chosen because you hate people like me. I'm gonna say that you're actually awesome, which is gonna make you great and make you feel justified in your hatred for other people like me. Stick to that, all the rest doesn't really matter. People forget about it.
Well, he has more to say. So let's take a listen and I'll give you my response.
I got 99% love. Now, the internet's a weird freaking place. There's a lot of mean people and trolls and clickbait people and all of that stuff. 99% of what I got, especially from the public people that I'm associated with, some of the names who I mentioned already, was all love. And by the way, I don't expect everyone who I'm friends with or associated with to have to acknowledge something publicly. A lot of people texted me privately or called me, and that's just fine. Forbes wrote a piece that said that Dave Rubin's audience and allies turn on him, and it had a picture, literally a picture of me and you on your set that you're sitting on right now. It did not even mention you in the article. So are there gonna be some traditional religious conservatives that are not happy with same-sex marriage and same-sex couples having kids? Of course there are. I believe in religious liberty, and as long as your beliefs don't impede on my life and my ability to have a family and all of that stuff, then I still think we can live in the same country, and I would hope that they can too. You're allowed to believe what you want.
Oh my God, the gymnastics, the gymnastics.
Look, from personal experience, I know Dave Rubin's not interested in actually reading about what's happening in the country. So maybe he's unaware of the fact that their religious beliefs, they want their religious beliefs to impede on your life and your ability to have children.
They don't want you to have those children.
They don't want you to have those children.
Legally want to bar you from having those children.
That's right.
That you have, that legally want you to be barred from the marriage that you're in. That is not a belief. That is very much a restriction they want to put on you and people like you. And thankfully, that is such an antiquated, BS, stupid way of life that we have beaten it.
Right. That
the other side that you've rejected has beaten that, and that's not acceptable anymore.
For now.
For now, because your side has decided, well, we can't win over people, we can't persuade them, but thanks to the Senate and the Electoral College, we can get our Supreme Court justices, and maybe if they're successful, they can, I guess, divorce you in the future. That's what they're working towards.
I mean, and then he also talks about like, no, I actually, the people that I'm associated with, they didn't publicly congratulate me, but they did call me and on the down low quietly congratulate. I wonder why. I wonder why they quietly and personally congratulated you, but didn't feel the need to defend you. Who, you're supposed to be their friend. They're supposed to see you as a friend. Let me just say, if one of my friends, if someone close to me, if someone I cared about was being targeted and attacked for a life-changing thing that's actually very exciting for them, no, I would get involved. I mean, you guys have seen me. Like, I can't help but like defend people I care about. I'll inject myself into that situation and defend people I care about, because that's what friends do, right? Whereas with him, he gets told to his face that his good friend Ben Shapiro wouldn't even go to a wedding or anniversary celebration because he's married to a man, and Ben Shapiro can't have that. It's against his religious beliefs, but he likes religious liberty, right? Dave Rubin does, so that's totally fine. It really, at the end of the day, this is the left's fault, because the left didn't congratulate him after he decided to make a career out of referring to progressives as individuals who have a mental illness.
Yeah.
I didn't forget about that. I remember that. And even so, okay, The attacks that he was dealing with were so disgusting that like I felt no joy in talking about it. I felt no joy in seeing it.
We defended him.
Yeah, I did.
defended him a ton there. I said it made me sick to see that.
Yeah, it makes me super sick. But no, it's the left's problem.
Of
and
course.
by the way, look, Dave Rubin, Dave Janet, I get it. You guys love money and you're willing to do anything to get it in your bank accounts, okay? Including sucking up to people who don't think you should even exist, who don't think you should have the right to have children, who don't think you even have the right to get married, okay? But just keep the kids away from these buffoons and these hateful people, because that's what I'm actually concerned about. Imagine raising kids in that environment where your friends are people who hate your parents, because that's what the reality is.
Yeah, and you teach them that that's just a disagreement. Like how Emma and I, we disagree about The Last Jedi. Is it good? Is it bad? Hey, we're just disagreeing. Is there something fundamentally, cosmically wrong about my love life? You know, small things. Like I try to come up with like, not even that dissimilar of a possible example. So my wife, her family descent is Mexican American. So imagine if I had a friend who was like, I'm not going to your wedding, that's wrong. It's wrong that you would marry someone like that. And I was like, I respect your opinion. You wanna go get lunch?
Yeah, it's
like,
insane.
can you imagine if I were to do that? And look, thankfully, again, that's something that we've beaten down, and that's an even more fringe position. There are more people in America who are still openly against same-sex marriage. That is disgusting, and it needs to be beaten down. And you're not gonna beat it down by providing cover to that.
But if you don't provide cover for it, in the case of Dave Rubin, well, then the funding streams might get cut off and you can't have that. Again, please keep your kids away from these terrible, terrible people. Just please do that. Because I can't imagine being raised in an environment where my parents' friends tell me how terrible my parents are and how they should not be married, how they shouldn't even have me as their child, like awful. Well, and by the way, let me just remind you of one of the more disgusting attacks that Dave Rubin received after his announcement. It's hard to listen to, but I just want to give it to you as an example of what Dave Rubin hears from the right, but somehow dismisses it as no big deal while attacking the left. Let's listen.
Just see what they said about that pedophile couple that are trafficking kids. What's her name again?
Are you talking about Dave Rubin?
Oh, Dave Rubin, that's it, yeah. Dave Rubin, yeah. Coming soon, baby one. Where did they steal this kid from? That's two men.
Well,
two men are gay.
Yeah,
they can't have kids.
It's got to pop out first, and then that's when they snatch them.
Oh, that's when they steal it.
Yeah, that's when they steal it. But that's like plotting a crime right there. So somebody should probably do something about that.
Sheriff Opile? Should we call Sheriff Opile? Someone needs to deal with this.
We should call somebody, because I have a kidnapping in process, you know.
Seriously, look, what is he crying for? Is he crying because he got away with it almost? Look at this. These two men who cannot reproduce, the only thing they can reproduce and then create is more debauchery and AIDS. They can spread AIDS.
Jesus.
Called them pedophiles, said that they're gonna spread AIDS. That was Edward Zoll and Lauren Witzke. That's the right wing in America. Some of them are a little more covert, but don't get it twisted. That is what they think. And those are the people that Dave Rubin enables and empowers in the quest for money. I hope that mansion felt real nice. Just keep your kids away from those people, please. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, Donald Trump and how he's handling the fact that the Senate race in Pennsylvania hasn't been called yet. It's just more of what you would expect from Donald Trump and his complete disregard for democracy. Come right back.
My brain is still in recovery mode from taking in so many high-level important ideas.
You should be watching The Watch List if you aren't already. That is J.R. Jackson's show, which you can watch weekdays. You can watch it live at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific at youtube.com/watchlisttYT. That's youtube.com/watchlisttYT. You can also check it out on facebook.com/watchlisttYT and youtube.com/watchlisttYT, which I already plugged. It's an awesome show, and JR is working so hard on it. Definitely check that out. Also, food for thought trivia. This is something that we've been doing for several weeks now, and it's a lot of fun. We've heard from so many of you in the first few weeks of our food for thought trivia contest, and we hear about your excitement to participate and win. And well, the new magic number is 200. So TYT members on TYT.com, iOS, Android, and YouTube have a chance of winning a $100 gift card to spend at Blue Apron from TYT. The first 200 members to answer the trivia question correctly during the Friday bonus episode will win a $100 gift card to Blue Apron. And you can find more information about this, including eligibility, by going to tyt.com/food. Also, let's just read from our Twitch audience. So Captain Cornball says, C-section, no problem. Just get the roll of duct tape out of the glove compartment and patch it up. Bills don't pay themselves. Yeah, that's.
Is that the Boebert thing?
Yeah.
Oh.
Dave Schmidt gifted 2 subs. Thank you for that. Miss Tina gifted a sub, and Swifty gifted 5 subs. Special thanks to our Twitch community. You guys are awesome. Also, special thanks to Jermaine Gill, who is a new YouTube member. We really appreciate it. We wouldn't be able to do this show without our members. Thank you for keeping us independent and sustainable. Chaplain Fred, AKA Prayer Dragon, says, hello, Anna, sending all my love from the Polish border. Another sleepless night, helicopter patrols lifting off all night to aid refugees being targeted. Thankfully, TYT keeps me sane. Stay salty, Anna. You know I will, and thank you for all the hard work you're doing. Prague, Kansas says, what's scarier is who voted for these idiotic lawmakers, referring to the Republican lawmakers during the House Judiciary Committee hearing today on abortion access. Lumbry Dragon says, I had to drive, this is just heartbreaking. I had to drive 6 hours to get an abortion at 23 weeks because the left side of my baby's heart stopped growing at 6 weeks. It was the hardest decision ever. And these GOP lawmakers and right-wing extremists act as if we women have this flippant attitude toward abortions. Like, we have a perfectly healthy healthy pregnancy at 9 months and we just decide last minute to abort it. That doesn't happen. Nope. It doesn't happen. Don't let them lie to you. All right, we got to get back to the show. See you there. Welcome back to the show. Anna Kasparian, John Iadarola with you. John was out of town when we did our election coverage last night, but don't you worry, John, we have an opportunity to talk about it right now. You ready?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, Donald Trump loves to peddle election conspiracy theories, and he has decided to do the exact same thing when it comes to the Senate race in Pennsylvania. Now, of course, he endorsed a candidate in that race, Dr. Oz, and he's super salty that we still don't know who won that race because the results so far make it too close to call, and there are still ballots being counted because there are mail-in ballots, which of course Trump is not very happy about. Now he wrote via Twitter, I'm sorry, not Twitter, via Truth Social. Wow, he's using Truth Social, it's surprising.
Finally.
Finally, right. Dr. Oz should declare victory. It makes it much harder for them to cheat with the ballots that they just happened to find. So he's alleging election fraud again. And he wants Dr. Oz to declare victory even though we don't know whether he won yet. But are you surprised? Is anyone really surprised? Of course he's doing this. Of course he's demanding that Dr. Oz do this. So what's the real reason that the race hasn't been called yet? Well, Dave McCormick addressed reporters just after 11:30 p.m. Eastern time last night to tell them that more counting is necessary because outstanding mail-in ballots mean the race could not be decided the night of the election. So just quick note, as we do this story right now, it still has not been decided. By the time you watch this video, it might be decided. So I just want to give you that like difference in what you're likely to notice. So currently Dr. Oz is leading by a tiny, tiny, tiny margin. So the last time we checked, he was at 31.3%, whereas Dave McCormick is at 31.1%. Now in Pennsylvania, there's an automatic recount that's triggered if the margin between the two candidates is less than half a point. So there could even be a recount, but Trump had more to say about the election fraud that he just made up, just pulled out of thin air. Here we go again. In Pennsylvania, they are unable to count the mail-in ballots. It's a big mess. Our country should go to paper ballots. I actually agree about the paper ballots. With same-day voting, just done in France, zero problems, get smart America. Well, European countries do a lot of things that are right that we could learn from that we usually don't learn from. But John, are you surprised by any of this?
I mean, how ridiculous! Like the last bit that he has is he's like, it's so mail-in ballots, that's bad. Let's get away from that. Let's go to paper ballots. But the mail-in ballots are paper, you doink. What are you talking about?
I know. Yep.
And what does same-day voting have to do with it? So yes, they do that. They also vote on the weekend.
Exactly. Yep.
Or we could give people the day off. Do you want that? Knock it out in one day. No, and by the way, I wouldn't agree to that because yes, France doesn't do early voting, but plenty of other places do. Plenty of Republican states have done it, as we've gone over literally for years now. They've done it for years and years and years, and it's been perfectly fine. There is not actually any problem with mail-in ballots except the fundamental fact that they make it easier to vote, and he doesn't want that. And by the way, it's not that they can't count mail-in ballots. You're gonna be shocked to find out they're just counting them. It takes a little bit of time to count them. And so let's say they count them, and let's say Dr. Oz gets more votes in the mail-in ballots. Is Trump gonna be like, throw them out? I don't want them. They're bad. You can't trust them. No, nobody believes that.
Trump likes mail-in ballots when he gets to vote by mail.
Yeah, he does it.
Yeah, Trump loves mail. Well, he'll have no problem with mail-in ballots as long as the results of the election end up working out in his favor or in the favor of someone he's endorsed. But one of the other reasons why he doesn't like mail-in ballots is because if you have a higher volume of mail-in ballots and it takes a while to count the ballots, you're not gonna find out the results of the election on that night. And he's a child, right?
Yeah,
he wants immediate gratification. He wants to know immediately. He doesn't care if it's undemocratic or it would end up dismissing or disregarding people's votes. If it meant that he gets to find out the results that night, it would be inaccurate because you're not counting all the ballots, but he doesn't care.
Yeah.
He's just, and by the way, he wouldn't want the results on that night if the results don't end up being what he wants. If it ends up that McCormick wins over his preferred candidate, his endorsed candidate, Dr. Oz.
Yeah, look, none of it makes any sense. So in this case, he's saying just declare victory because that makes it harder for them to cheat by finding ballots later. He's obviously referring to 2020, but him declaring victory immediately doesn't seem to have helped him win the presidency. So I don't even understand his theory. You still aren't the president, you idiot. But anyway, okay, so forget that. In this case though, clearly they're cheating once again. But wait, who is cheating? So the Democrats and Hugo Chavez, who stole the election in Pennsylvania in 2020, okay, so presumably they're still in charge. They're, I guess, working for McCormick because you're not even trying to state that somehow McCormick has rigged the vote in Pennsylvania. So the Democrats have decided that they have ultimate control over whoever gets the primary, and they're gonna give it to McCormick, a guy who seems more likely to win the general election than Dr. Oz, who's relatively easy to attack. If that's the case, if they can just choose whoever they wanted, why put a Democrat in there? Have a Democrat run as a Republican and then have him win, which is presumably, possibly an actual description of Dr. Oz, because who the hell knows what his politics was like 10 years ago. None of this makes any sense. And it's not supposed to for us, it's not intended for us, it's intended for conservatives. But if you're like a MAGA guy watching this, Does any of this make sense to you, honestly?
They don't care.
Does any, like, are you following any of this? You just know, like, I want Oz win. They say Oz good, Oz not win, so now they ruin Oz. And then if Oz ends up getting more mail-in ballots, if the ballots don't appear to sink his candidacy, so are they good? Are they bad? Is it all contingent?
Doesn't matter. They'll change their commentary, they'll change the narrative, they cherry pick, they don't care that they're hypocrites, they don't care that Trump, if he had his way, would dismantle whatever's left of our democratic process. They don't care. They don't care.
Well, and if they've rigged the vote in Pennsylvania, then why did Summer Lee win? If it's the Democratic establishment that's rigging the vote, why did they let this progressive that they put millions of dollars to take out win? And that was a really narrow one. It would be super easy to suddenly, hey, here's 5,000 votes, they could win it. Why don't they do that? These are all very basic questions, so they don't have answers to any of them.
We have a huge portion of the Republican Party who now believe that the 2020 election was rigged, right? And this issue isn't gonna go away. For me, this is way bigger than one Republican primary race in Pennsylvania for a Senate seat. For me, this is what our elections have devolved into and will continue to devolve into for, I don't know, election cycles to come.
Yeah.
And that's the part of it that's frustrating. It's not being able to just enjoy a win or accept a loss. It's just all of the garbage and lies and claims about fraud that follow our electoral process. Because the horse race wasn't annoying enough. All of the other stuff that's associated with our elections wasn't terrible enough. Now we have that added layer of people refusing to accept the results of the election because they don't like the results. That's what we're gonna have to deal with. In a country that's already being ripped apart by culture wars and all this other stuff that doesn't actually in any way have an impact on improving our lives. That is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And that's what frustrates me about it. All right, we gotta take a break. When we come back, we've got more news. I wanna lighten it up. So we'll talk about the MAGA dweebs coming out with children's books about the Steele dossier.
It's good children's stuff.
Sounds like a great children's book, can't wait. We have that and more when we come back. In our super chat section has an important comment, and I knew this, but I failed to mention it, so thank you for your comment. Doctor here, as of very recently, there were only four doctors in the entire country who performed abortions in the 3rd trimester. They are extremely selective with their surgeries, and there is always a reason. So there you have it, a doctor confirming what I had mentioned earlier. But it doesn't matter. The right wing will continue claiming that partial birth abortions are happening all over the place. It's, God.
Women love just carrying a pregnancy for like 8 months just for the thrill of eliminating it in the final month. That's what they do.
That's what I was saying. Look, I don't have kids, so obviously I've never been pregnant for 9 months. But I've read a lot about it, and I have known a lot of women who have been pregnant for 9 months. It is not a cakewalk. It is incredibly difficult. Yeah. Very few women have easy, like no problem pregnancies. Some women develop diabetes while they're pregnant. Like there's all sorts of stuff. It's uncomfortable. Like it's your body changes. Like how does anyone believe?
They've destroyed common sense. If you can make them believe that everyone wants to rape and then eat babies, then the idea that they could carry it for 8 months and then get rid of it, that's an easy sell at that point. Yep. They've convinced them of the craziest stuff, now everything else is free.
Yep. Parker says, wanted to say last night's election coverage was super awesome.
Hey.
Wish John could have been there.
Me too.
Was funny hearing Jenks say, here comes summer all night. Yeah. Yep.
I'm surprised he didn't go with Summer is Coming. Get the Game of Thrones thing in there.
What the hell?
Come on, Jank.
See, like, election night just isn't good enough if you're not there, because you and
That's what I've always
Jank,
said.
like, you guys are the stars of the show on election night. You know? No, you guys play off of each other's energy really well. Like, yeah. Anyway, I think I did an okay job. Mostly I was concerned about keeping my cynicism in check, and I think I did a good job, to be honest with you. So
But there was so much good news.
proud of myself. Yes, there was. There was lots of good news.
That's all.
I just, look, don't get me wrong, it was good news, but like, there's still that big hurdle. Remember, primary elections, they still got to beat the Republican candidate in the general. And I think that we have strong candidates who can do that. But even past that, like, let's see how this all plays out. That's all I'm saying.
Sure.
I'm not getting my hopes up. Black Banner 416 says, when I was a kid, I was bullied by friends. My mom asked why I'd want to hang out with kids who don't like me. I posed the question to Dave Rubin. Good question. Well, money.
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 It's money. A little bit of fame, kind of, but mostly money.
Fame is overrated. Money, not so much, but really you're gonna sell yourself out for that, anyway.
With inflation, money is kind of overrated.
Totally.
About 8% or so.
Jose Figueroa Jr., thank you for the super chat. There's no comment, but thank you for your generosity. Let's get back to the show. Welcome back to the show. Anna and John with you. Let's get to our next story. The company looking to merge with Truth Social, that's the social media platform rolled out by Donald Trump and his cronies, is worried about Trump's previous failures and making it clear that, well, even this one, even Truth Social, might not succeed, which I think is a pretty smart way of really looking at this whole venture that Trump is pushing. Now, Digital World, the SPAC or blank check firm, is seeking to merge with Trump Media and Technology Group, TMTG, the owner of Truth Social. Trump himself would control between 47% and 58% of the merged company and would serve as its chairman. Monday's filing shows. But the SPAC is actually airing its concerns about working with a business person who has gone bankrupt multiple times. In a Monday filing, and this is a regulatory filing, meaning that they have to do this, a number of companies that were associated with President Trump have filed for bankruptcy. This is what the filing says. There could be no assurances that TMTG will not also become bankrupt. While all of the foregoing were in different businesses than TMTG, there can be no guarantee that TMTG's performance will exceed the performance of those entities. And the filing came with receipts because they have to be specific about what they're referring to in regard to Trump's failed businesses. And so Digital World Acquisition Corp highlighted the bankruptcies of Trump Taj Mahal, Trump Plaza, and Trump Castle, and the failures of Trump University, Trump Vodka, and Trump Steaks, among others.
Trump 2024.
Trump everything, okay? Like everything about that guy just screams, I have failed. Imagine inheriting $413 million from Papa and then proceeding to go bankrupt multiple times. Literally, even if he didn't invest that money, if he took the $413 million and just parked it in a certificate of deposit account, he would have been better off. But like, it's Trump. I mean, the guy is lazy. He spent his presidency sitting in front of a television in the White House while eating McDonald's to watch Fox News and call into their shows. That's what Trump did. The majority, and he did go golfing, to be fair. There was a little bit of physical activity.
Yeah, he got COVID at one point. That's true.
That's
Yeah, he looked into the sun directly at the worst possible time. He was busy. Don't give him his due.
Okay, I'll give him his due. I'll give him his due. But I won't do the due. Okay, all right.
This segment has gone bankrupt.
I did, it did.
And I'm pulling my money out of it. Anyway, yeah, so look, they have to say what they're gonna say. Maybe they think that doing this will result in them getting kind of a better deal or something. It can be a business tactic in that way. If I was one of the people investing in that organism though, I would say, why would you be investing in him? Of all of the things that you could invest in, even in social media or whatever, like honestly, I'd go into NFTs or something. You know what I think about those, but I would do that instead. Like if it has to be some sort of digital investment, there are so many startups, so many technologies you could back. Like you're gonna get into Truth Social now, not like on the ground floor where, who knows? Maybe they'll have a serious tech team. The rollout will be smooth. There will be a lot of people actively using it. Trump will actually use it in the beginning. Maybe it'll be an actual competitor to Twitter. But after all that we know about the trouble rolling it out on multiple platforms, the long wait list, Trump seeming to not care about it for so long, and then Elon Musk pretending that he's gonna buy Twitter or whatever, even after all that, now you're gonna invest?
Oh, it gets
What do you
better.
think is gonna happen with Truth Social in 5 years? Everybody's gonna be using it?
It gets better.
Okay, let's hear it.
Are you ready? Okay.
Let's hear it.
So to ensure the success of Truth Social, there were some stipulations. I love the word stipulations. It's fun to say. All right, so the filing also showed that Trump has agreed to post on Truth Social 6 hours before making similar posts on other platforms. Let's just pause there. Let's pause there for a second. This is supposed to be Trump's platform. Like why do you have to force him, right? Like if you're starting a business, if you're rolling out your own social media platform, shouldn't you be super hyped about it, like super excited about it? But like here, we need to have stipulations in writing to get Donald Trump to use his own social media platform. So he needs to post on it 6 hours before making similar posts on other platforms. However, it also stipulated that Trump can post from any platform at any time for political messaging.
That seems like a bit of a loophole.
That's the biggest loophole.
Like, so
you can't get loopier than that.
Like, okay, so he can go right to Twitter for the politics, but like if he starts live tweeting the new Game of Thrones prequel, we'll have that. We'll have exclusivity on that at least. The next, season of Emily in Paris, like we've got his thoughts right fresh before anyone else gets them.
Look, by the way, his best tweets are on dumb things like Emily in Paris. Like, by the way, I don't know.
Has he actually tweeted about that?
I don't know if he has, but like the tweets that were entertaining had nothing to do with politics because politics actually have an impact on our lives, right? But yeah, it is amazing. Like, remember, he hadn't posted on Truth Social. He posted on it once. And then he got all these negative headlines, like people clowning on Truth Social. I think Devin Nunes is the person like in charge of Truth Social, and he had to like headlock him and get him to, put him in a chokehold and get him to finally like post something on Truth Social.
6 weeks, yeah.
Exactly. And by the way, there are already telltale signs of failure, which we've gotten into before in the past. SimilarWeb, which provides website data analysis, had estimated that the average visitor to the site spent only 90 seconds there, compared to the 7 and 9 minutes users spent on conservative networks Getter and Gab, respectively. Trump himself, a former Twitter obsessive who'd once sent 200 tweets and retweets in a single day, had posted just once since the launch. Wow, that is amazing.
I am shocked. Like, I understand. Like, when we will live tweet like a debate, you'll do quite a few. But there are a lot of people. I am shocked sometimes. Like, I'll hear that like Ben Shapiro said something, or one of those people, or like Glenn Greenwald or whatever. So I'll go to find it, and like it'll be they tweeted it last night. So I'll go in the morning, and you just have to scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. There are people that is the only thing that they do is all day long just tweet and tweet and tweet.
Yeah.
And many of those tweets will say that Twitter isn't real life, but they short tweet it as if it's treated as if it's better than real life. Like that is the true reality. The rest of this is a biological inconvenience.
Can you imagine if Twitter was like your only reality?
I actually like quite a bit about Twitter, aside from the politics, which is my main reason for being there. When we're talking about food and dogs and TV, I like it. I don't mind it. It's just the stuff that they get up to, that shouldn't be your whole life. That seems like a purgatory all its own.
I would lose my mind if I was sending out 200 tweets and retweets a day. Not interested, sorry.
Except for debates. I find the debate stuff fun. I'm looking forward to that in the next presidential election.
Of course.
We'll go back and forth and everything, but yeah.
All right, one final story for you all before we wrap up the main show. And make sure you check out our bonus episode today because we've got a lot of great stories to get to there. TYT.com/join to become a member. So let's talk about this children's book. Conservatives claim that they don't like indoctrinating kids, even as they're indoctrinating kids. And the dweeb that you see beside me has come out with a children's book to indoctrinate kids. And it's all about the Steele dossier and how it led to the Russia investigation into Donald Trump's possible collusion with Putin. I mean, I don't know about you, but whenever I'm hanging out with my 5-year-old niece, she's like, yo, what's up with that Steele dossier? You know, what's up with my children's book? What? Okay, so let's give you the details here. Now, it's propaganda. It's meant to be propaganda, and it's very unlikely that adults are gonna buy this for their children. It's very likely adults are gonna buy this for themselves because they themselves are children. But the book is titled The Plot Against the King, and the person who wrote it, again, it's a children's book, is Kash Patel. And he claims that the Steele dossier that was compiled by Christopher Steele, a former British spy, was used as the catalyst to launch this FBI investigation into possible Russian collusion.
That doesn't seem accurate.
It isn't accurate. It's actually very inaccurate. In reality, the information in the Steele dossier did not reach the FBI officials involved in the investigation until almost a year later. Okay, and even the then Republican House Intelligence Committee, which Patel worked for, found no evidence for Trump's claim. Now back to the fun. Let's talk about this book and what the whole premise is because it's hilarious. So the narrative lionizes Patel, Jesus, and depicts him as a wizard who supposedly shows how the king, Trump, was wrongly accused of cheating to take the throne. The book claims the king was accused of cheating by a shifty knight, a reference to the Democratic chair of the Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, who claims to have a paper from a Steele box attesting to wrongdoing. But Patel writes that he then found evidence that the slug keeper Comey, a reference to former FBI Director James Comey, put slugs in the Steele box at the behest of Hillary Clinton, who was also vying for the throne, a reference to Clinton, of course. The wizard Patel then proclaims to the kingdom, the book says that the King Donald is innocent and did not work with the Russianians, a reference to Russia, and Hillary wrote that paper and had her sneaky slugs slide into the Steele box. I think it's a great children's book.
What are the slugs for? I thought the paper was the bad thing. Why? Wouldn't you be more suspicious of the paper if it was covered in slugs? This plot sucks.
When isn't
both
the, right
the scheme as well as the plot of that sucks?
Yeah,
that's just terrible that he put himself in the book. That's just deeply embarrassing.
And he lionizes himself in the book, which is.
So are they married? Because Trump is the king and she's the queen. Are they married in this fantasy? Is he imagining Trump sleeping with Hillary Clinton? Is that what he's cooking up here?
Listen, based on what Madison Cawthorn told me, the right wing is into some freaky deaky stuff.
Yeah,
okay,
Keeper Comey will give you those ground up slugs. So that stuff will get you crazy. This book is it's such a terrible idea.
No, I mean, but no one's gonna buy this for their kids. Kids are not.
No, Think Tank will buy 10,000 copies.
Sure, yeah, I think that'll happen. By the way, if you want an autographed copy, not by Trump, but by Kash Patel.
Well, he's a wizard.
Yes, it'll only cost you $60. But you'll get Kash's autograph, which, I mean, who doesn't want Kash Patel's autograph?
I mean, that's invaluable, which I'm not great with English like he is. I think that means valueless. It's just so embarrassing. Whatever happened with the 2016 election, whatever actually happened in truth, we will never know and it'll never matter. We're done, we're moving past it, nothing happened. If anything happened, they got away with it. why would you still be writing books about it now? Like, I can see if he came out with this book like literally like 4 years ago.
You know what's amazing
but now?
to me? No, what's amazing to me is the people who are constantly like whining about Russiagate.
Russianian Gate, technically.
Russianian Gate. No one talks about Russiagate more than them. Like
100%.
They bring up Russia and Russiagate every day. Like Aaron Mate is like Russiagate. Like he like has nightmares about it.
It's like it's so like literally.
Dude, let it
make
go.
a book
It's
about
over.
the 2020
It's
election.
Over. Find something else. Find something else to weirdly serve as the reply guy for. Like just,
totally.
It's amazing. And finally, one last thing from Trump, who posted about this on Truth Social. The plot against the king is the true story about the Russia collusion hoax, written for children by my friend Kash.
Written by children.
Yeah, seriously. Live the tale through the eyes of great characters like the handsome King Donald and Kash the Wizard.
Sad.
It's so sad.
It's so deeply sad.
So sad.
No, don't do it, buddy. I hate you, but I can't take you doing this to yourself in public.
He called himself handsome. Nothing could be further from the truth. Bonus episode is next. TYT.com/join. We will see you there.
Our audience has given us everything, so we couldn't be more connected. When we first started, people would start giving us directions and say, okay, the mics are too large, move them. Turn them into lav mics. I mean, they were incredible. And then one guy walked in and gave us a really expensive switcher and said, you guys need this, and walked out. Okay, it's amazing. They helped us build a studio. They did a $2 million funding campaign for us. And so they really are us. We do this show together to the point where some of our hosts are even former listeners. So when we say that the audience is part of TYT, we really mean it.
I think what the audience also appreciates is especially if they're members, they really get an inside look into who we are, our personal lives, what drives and motivates us. It goes beyond just storytelling. I think that what we do is allow our viewers and our listeners into our daily lives, and we give them kind of like this inside look into everything that we're passionate about and why it is that we're doing what we're doing, right? Like the motivation behind what we're doing, I think is important for our audience to know, and we're not shy about sharing that with them. And it's different from what people typically see in legacy media outlets where everything is kind of dry and robotic and there's really no personality or authenticity that comes along with it. Oftentimes when we're doing the show, I don't really think of it as me telling them stories. I think of it as us having a mutual